Good morning, listeners. Good morning, viewers, and good morning to you, Pat. I don't want you to feel left out. You're part of the team, you know.
Yeah, part of the team, yes.
How are things there in Donegal? Is
Are
there a
things in
sense of
Blackamara?
gloom still since last Sunday?
No, Judy, I think we got over it very quickly. As I
Hmm.
said to you on Monday, had we had a raw deal or had we sort of came very close and then lost by a fluky point or something, people
Yeah.
would have been sort of hard done by or felt hard done by. But Jude, when you get lose by what was it, 10 points, and you were never ever once in the lead in the game, I
Hmm.
think you take your beating with no whinging. Kerry
Hmm.
deserved it. It's as simple as that.
I was listening to Joe Brawley and he was talking about the game on his podcast, and he said he claimed that Jim McGuinness was a bit like Jose Mourinho. That
Yeah.
Jose Mourinho was a terrific organizer of teams, you know, and they became really impregnable.
Uh,
But that the Kerry team had
Aye,
was
but
sussed out.
there was no plan B. When somebody
Ah,
unlocks their system, they don't know how to
ah,
react.
ah,
Yeah,
ah. And he also faulted them for this thing. I mean, it never occurred when I was a young guy, but marking zones rather than
ah,
marking the man.
ah,
I don't know how the hell that works because we were always was shouting at guys, mark your man, you know, mark your
yeah.
man.
Well, one of my mentors, a man called Sean Kern, many years ago, he played for Donegal, and there's a guy called Brian McNuff. Brian managed Donegal, but
Yeah.
Brian had this thing about marking space. My mucker who played for Donegal says he regarded as the most stupid thing. He says, if somebody puts a ball into a space and there's nobody there, you know what he called it? The boy running on is going to get it. So in other
Yeah.
words, he says, if you're marking your man, he doesn't get it. You
Yeah,
know.
yeah. I can't. I suppose the way I was brought up, but I can't understand it really.
Mm.
Okay, let's get cracking on our topics of the day because there are quite a few. And I gather there's a new book out which we're told by the papers reveals Martin McGuinness's human side. Well, now, I'd have to say this is maybe after the event because you may remember this, Pat. Martin
Yes.
McGuinness, the man I knew,
Yeah.
which came out in, I think, 2016 by my
Yeah.
good self. And
Yeah.
among the contributors is you,
Yeah.
followed by, I think, Jerry Adams, followed by
Yeah.
Mary Lou McDonald, and quite a few others. Um, so I think they're given this book, they say, shows his human side.
Good God.
Well, I would have thought that those interviews showed his human side. The only thing they might have that book might be slightly remiss in was that we didn't go into individual IRA incidents.
Yeah.
And I get the impression that this book does. There's much talk of the fact there's photographs of him with a rifle
Yeah.
crouched down, I gather, during an attack of some kind. Uh, but you know, I remember one of the people who contributed to the book, and he said that this thing about Martin McGuinness, there's a famous picture of him with a pistol, a
Yeah.
revolver, and he said that's rubbish. McGuinness was as blind as a bat; he couldn't have hit a wall. So
Yeah.
this thing of him crouching down with a rifle is really for the birds a bit.
Yeah.
Another thing is that they play up on is how important Bernie was in his life and
Well,
how
she
he
was
came
in
home
fairness.
every
Yeah.
evening.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
mean, I think that was common knowledge.
Yeah.
Uh, I'm sure Jim McVeigh, who's the guy who wrote this book, not thanking me for saying these things, but it's true.
Yeah.
I think I don't know how many interviews there was in that, but there was sufficient, I think, to give me a very full sense of of McGuinness. I'm just trying to think of who the other people are that are in it. Um, yeah, Dennis Bradley, Mitchell McLaughlin, that was the one that said he was as blind as a bat.
Yeah.
Don Purvis, Eamon McCann, Danny Morrison, Jonathan Powell,
Yeah.
Martin Anderson, uh, Eileen Paisley.
Yeah.
Very good, I think. Go out and get
Yeah.
your copies now
Uh,
while it's still
yeah.
possible.
But no, Judith, I would love to. I don't, off the top of my head, I don't know who Jim McVeigh is. So, but fair play to him.
I
But
think he
I'd love
was
to.
I think he's a city councillor, a Sinn Féin city councillor, but and more or less a contemporary. I think couldn't have been. Would
Yeah.
he have been? Yeah, might have been a contemporary of Martin's.
Yeah. Now, you know the thing to boil it down to. this thing that Martin McGuinness and the British media and his, I think it was Dennis Bradley or maybe Bishop Dale, I can't remember, said this idea that he had two heads. That he was, Martin McGuinness was neither a psychopath nor anything else. In fact, Martin, I remember one senior IRA guy said when they put somebody out of town, all for doing whatever nefarious deeds, the mother would go to Martin and say, "Hey, Martin, my wee Johnny's only 16 or 17. I know he did that and all the rest." He says 2 minutes later, Martin says, "Look, all right, Mrs. We'll sort that out and whatever." And he
Mm-hmm.
says Martin was an easy sort of a sob story. I knew for years, like, okay, could be as hard as rock, but there was a definite, very human and humane side to him as well.
Oh,
He
aye,
wasn't
that's
some
true.
sort of lunatic that the British media. By the way, when you're in the British Army and you kill somebody, you what do you call it, or are involved in conflict, you're a hero. But when you don't wear that sort of official uniform, oh, you're a terrorist. Well, have you talked to a lot of people in Derry? They will see Martin McGuinness as a soldier for the other way around. Now, I'm not, by the way, I'm not an IRA supporter. I don't agree with but like Martin McGuinness was honourable. He fought what he thought was a war against oppression.
Mhm.
Whether you agree with it or not, son, that's what he thought.
Well, I can see the consistency of these people trying to make him out, as you say, to have two heads, because
Yeah,
that's how the IRA was depicted generally. And the higher
yeah,
up you went, obviously, the more number of heads the person had.
yeah,
Uh, I mean, they had to depict, or they didn't have to, but they chose to depict the opposition, that is the IRA and INLA, as nutters,
yeah.
crazy, mad, cruel nutters.
Julian, just to digress a wee minute, I read something on social media there. Remember the Miami shooting?
Yeah.
One of the guys from the Miami, I can't remember his name now, Des Garrity or something like that, I think might have been some of that. He says, without question, Captain Robert Nearack was at the shooting that night. He says there's no doubt about it. He says there was a guy there who seemed to be running the show who had an English accent, and he says, well, sort of an upper class accent. And he said, whatever, I can't remember the rest of it, but I remember, I was going somewhere, so I just read that wee bits and all the rest of it. And dude, this thing that the IRA were the only evil players and the British were the honest brokers and they weren't involved. Dude, they were running loyalist murder gangs all over the place. They were running on farmers all over the place. They were running Freddie Scappaticci. They were playing all sorts of games on and this sort of thing. And then they seal up records for 50, 70 years so we can't find out exactly what they're doing. And yet they've conned people that that we were the sort of the good guys, we were the moderates, we were all the rest. Dude, they were up to their eyeballs on murder and mayhem and all the rest of it. So like I find, and then when you say that, oh, you're an IRA sympathizer and supporter, you would say that.
Yeah.
The evidence that I'm saying for what I'm saying is out there.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, I mean, this is always the case. The opposition, no matter what war is being fought, the opposition is painted as being,
Mm.
crazies, especially if they're the weaker side, the
Yeah,
insurgents.
yeah,
They'll find ways of depicting them and makes them out to be nuts. And I'm sure that's how, for example, the people who took, God, took where? South America, Cuba, the
yeah.
overthrow of the dictator in Cuba, who
Was he
essentially
Baptiste?
made Cuba
Baptiste?
a vast brothel,
Yeah,
which was
yeah.
used by big shots from the
You
States.
know, what they don't tell you is the Americans went down there in the 1950s for live sex shows. There
Yeah,
was, what do you call it? As you said, there was a brothel. The man wasn't a Baptista. He was
yeah.
as corrupt as could be, and yet now Cuba is communist, and it's almost of it's evil. Like the Cubans have one of the longest longevity in the world. They have a far better health system than they have in Britain. They have more doctors per capita than any place else in the world. They developed their own vaccine for COVID, etc., etc., etc.
They have
And
a
yet
very high, an amazingly high literacy rate.
yeah, and at the same time, the Americans have deliberately blockaded, put on tariffs to anybody that'll supply them or fly in airlines to them and all the rest, and so on. Despite all that, Cuba has survived reasonably well.
But you see, it goes right back to the First World War, I gather. There was talk about bringing other, countries join in and fight on the side of the Allies for defense of gallant little Belgium.
Aye,
Gallant little Belgium that went out to the Congo, was it, and
yeah.
chopped off guys'
Uh,
arms if they weren't working hard
Yeah.
enough.
What? No, they did. A certain if the adults didn't reach a certain target for cutting whatever it was, sugar cane or rubber plantation, they cut off the hands of their children. So in other
Oh,
words, King Leopold. And by the way, they talk about the Holocaust being the biggest mass industrial killing. Belgium's killing in the Congo reached something like 8 million.
yeah.
So, Jude, but because they were black skinned and they weren't sort of pro-European or whatever it was,
Mhm.
that's largely covered over.
I told myself before we started this, Pat, I wouldn't mention this the Middle East, but I'm going to break my rule briefly. I was listening to the radio today, and the guy
Mm,
was talking about how they had something like 90 children killed,
yeah,
and he said something like this. Now, I hope I'm not misquoting him. That 80 of those 90 had been shot either in the chest or in the head.
yeah.
What kind of, I mean, what kind of
So,
fucker
Jude,
does that?
there's a surgeon was on there the other day. He says he's got the impression. In fact, he says he thinks he's got evidence that Israeli, some of them are using target practice. He says there's some in the head and some in the groin. He
Yeah.
says deliberately. He said, and he got, and the one of the people that was I saw on social media, one of the interviewers, a pro-Israeli, she says this is sort of anti-Semitism and all that. He says, listen, I've got evidence, I've got photographs of children with bullets in their head. So he says, don't bother, Jude, yeah, it's unbelievable.
Dear God. Okay, well, let's leave it there. I think we've made our point.
Yeah.
Let's go to a much more pleasant topic, which is Emma Little Pengelly. She's in the
Yeah,
headlines of
yeah,
Irish news today, I think. And it makes the point that she visited the airport lounge in London, I guess,
yeah.
on taxpayer funded trip to Wimbledon with her husband, who's also head honcho in the civil service up at
I
Stormont.
think he's, isn't he the head of the education department?
I might well be, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, here's the thing. I have my own views on this, but you tell me what you think, Pat.
Ju- she's apparently it cost 1,000 quid for the 2 day
Yeah,
trip to
yeah,
London.
close to 1,000.
What do you call it? And she was
2 day trip.
sitting in the box with the England soccer manager Thomas Tuchel and various other dignitaries and bigwigs and whatever.
Yeah.
Dude, you know something? It doesn't surprise me. Sure. Didn't the Robinsons? I remember didn't Peter and his wife buy two fountain pens or something at 500 quid each and so on. But having said that, it really doesn't surprise me. Like in my other life, I was in part of the management team of a certain organization, and I remember this finance
Was this a
guy.
legal organization or
I know it
illegal?
was very legal, but I remember we were like half the time I used to forget to claim for stuff. It wasn't because I wasn't fucking greedy
Yeah,
the same as everybody else. I
yeah.
just forgot. But anyway, we were going through this thing, and this guy he was the chief financial officer. He was probably on maybe 200,000 a year. And I remember when he got two bottles of water, I think it was about maybe 80 pence. He says, "Can I have a receipt?" In other words, he even claimed for the two bottles of water. And I was
Mm,
going, good and
mm.
merciful. I am not at the races at all. But hey, a lot of people in politics are using the public purse and so on. And the Pengellies doesn't surprise me in the least.
Well, I tell you, Pat, I have quite clear feelings in this. Uh, it depends on the answer to this question. Is she legally entitled to that? If
No.
she is, I don't blame her one bit. Her
Yeah.
and her husband may have a good time. Why they'd want to be anywhere near a guy so mournful looking as Thomas Tuchel, I can't imagine. But clearly they would have enjoyed Wimbledon for a couple of days. And if they're a part of the deal of them, her as deputy first minister, is that he being high up in education, civil
Yeah.
service, if part of the deal is that they can take nearly £1,000, I say good luck to them. I'd do exactly the same thing myself. If, on the other hand, they're not entitled to that, then that's outrageous.
Yeah.
Simple
Well,
as that, black and white.
I doubt if they've done anything illegal. But the question is it sort of legal? Dude,
Well,
what was,
yeah, it
you
has
know,
to be. It has to be. It has to be either legal or illegal.
Yeah, no, but here's what I'm getting. The point I'm making is, like, they got an invite from the All England Tennis Club,
Yeah.
but here's yeah, so as deputy first minister, so right, she's probably saying I went as deputy first minister. But here's the point: what possible public benefit? What accrued to the people of Northern Ireland? What was the benefit to the taxpayer for her going over to for 2 days to watch a tennis match? Did she bring back any jobs? Did she meet any ministers? Did she achieve anything other than sit in the crowd, look at a tennis match, and come home? Like,
Well, I suppose.
no, but she's probably going to turn around and say, "Hey, wait a minute, I went there and it was part of the PR, the outreach, and all the rest of it." But like, did you have to ask yourself, legally, is that legal? If you know what I mean?
Well, I see your point, Pat. I think I disagree to some extent.
Yeah,
I can see how, well, for example, Michelle O'Neill went to the All Ireland final.
yeah,
You may be sure that Micheál Martin will be at the All Ireland final, the hurling and the football. And there's sort of a custom where the head of state goes to these things, or the leader of the government.
yeah,
So you could argue that she would be wanting to emphasize the extent to which the North is part of the UK.
yeah.
So if she was there, people might say, "Who's she? Oh,
She's
is
not
the
there.
North?"
Supposed
A lot of
to.
English people forget that the North of Ireland is a part of the UK. So I can see her thinking, and if she's entitled to do it, fair enough. Some people might see it as being a bit, I don't know what, by digging the hand in when the opportunity arises. But if the thing's legal, fair enough. Go ahead if that's your thing. Uh,
Yeah,
I, I could see being at Wimbledon quite an interesting and exciting experience, but I wouldn't
yeah.
want to be sitting near Thomas Tuchel because I
No,
get
no.
depressed. He's the most
Gee,
depressing looking man I've ever seen.
doleful.
Tuchel.
Took all
Okay.
day. Yes.
So I did. Well, it's kind of fun too, as it were. In a sense, it summarizes both cultures. On the one hand, Emma Little Pengelly's at the
All England.
All England Lawn Tennis and Croquet Club, and
uh,
Michelle O'Neill is at the semi-final between Tyrone and Kerry. There
I
is a
tell you,
difference. I think you
but
can
I think I stood.
you
Yeah,
say that for sure.
uh,
Okay, here's a serious one, Pat. I think it's one that I don't think about it too much, but when I do think about it, I get depressed. The Garda Commissioner Drew Harris soon no longer to be with us, alas. His
yeah.
term of office is completed.
Just
He'll only
stop
get
there
about
for a second.
£160,
There's
160,000 pension.
Yeah, but there's a guy. I was listening to the news the other day. I think it's some deputy commissioner. I think he's called Kelly. Has been now nominated for the top job.
That's
And
right.
geez, the salary. I didn't realize
Oh,
the
wow.
salary's something like 327,000. Jesus, I was going, yeah, 300. Christ Almighty, dude. 10 to
Well,
five,
you pay
5 years
peanuts
at
and you
that, and
get
you've
monkeys.
earned well over 1 million.
I know. And the irony of all that is that I gather they're having problems recruiting guards
Yeah,
because they're saying the salary's not worth it and the
yeah,
pension's not worth it, and you're liable to be an object of physical assault more and more as time goes by.
yeah,
I think it's pretty ironic, Drew Harris coming in, to pronouncing something in his final days.
yeah.
Uh,
So anyway,
anyway,
what's he saying?
he's talking about pornography. And he
Yeah.
says extreme online pornography is radicalizing young men.
Mm.
He says it must be faced up to. There's a multi-billion-dollar industry behind this, and we're not going to defeat it by attacking it. What we have to do is make sure people are educated and understand what a proper relationship is. This raises the question for me, Pat. What does porn add to society?
Can't answer that. Really can't.
Well, for some people, it's pretty, well, I suppose porn by its nature is an attractive thing. So
Yeah,
people get pleasure from it. If you were in charge, Pat, supposing you would find yourself the King of Ireland tomorrow,
yeah.
would you outlaw porn?
Jesus, it's a question that never been asked. Yeah, Jude, I see here. Right, let me. I haven't thought this through, so I could probably find myself in Duff's tenders after
Okay.
this finished.
Say
But here's the
allegedly every
thing.
so often and you'll be all right.
Yeah, yeah. But you know the thing is, see if you're under 18, I would say definitely not. But I've got this thing in my head. I'm a liberal. I believe consenting adults are entitled to do whatever they want as long as it doesn't harm anyone else. If you're gay, you're gay. If you're straight, you're straight. If you want to do porn, do porn. That's your business. It's not for me. That's. But then can you isolate yourself? We don't live in silos. So something you do, does that affect somebody else? So how do we legislate for that? Porn, some people, hey Jude, some people can watch porn and it not affect them in the least. And then maybe some other young fellow watches a bit of porn, goes out and rapes a wee girl. I don't know. I haven't a clue. You need to do research. You need to do all sorts of studies and find out what effect. Now, one thing I do think, Jude, I think there's a lot of young fellas have an attitude towards women that borders on misogyny. They think they're there for only one thing. But then the other side of the story, Jude, I think women also have to take some sort of responsibility for what's happening out there. Like, Jude, sometimes, and when you say this, you're accused of being an old fashioned. But hey, there's almost right now, women are going out. If you watch any of the videos for the pop charts, a lot of women are wearing next to nothing. The whole thing, sales are like, I think if they're trying to promote a video, it seems to be all no, it seems to be sex sales. I mean, and is that are women contributing to the way they're portrayed themselves?
Well, I think they are indeed, because I read an article in the Guardian, I think it was the other day, and it was about a woman called Bonnie something or another,
Yeah,
and she's a porn artist, so to
yeah.
speak, and she runs a site, and she's making £2 million a month.
Geez, that's all right.
What she's doing is the kind of thing she's doing is this: she's um, having sex with over 1,000 men consecutively over a 6 hour, 12-hour period. And
Jesus
all of
Christ.
that's filmed. She is from Nottingham, I think, and she allows the students, male students of Nottingham Trent University, to have sex with her as long as they consent to the camera showing it
Mm,
happen. Uh, Now, I take your point about freedom and people doing what they feel is they want to do,
yeah,
and God knows we all seek a bit of pleasure in life.
yeah.
But somehow or another, that seems to me to be degrading humanity.
Absolutely, Jude. Didn't know you were going to come up with that one. That to me is almost animalistic. Jude, where's the bit of love, affections,
Oh,
and all of this?
Pat, I was watching a movie last night, and I was saying to my good missus, has the connection between affection, love, fidelity, etc., and sex, has that been smashed?
I think it has, Jude. Like, if you read modern novels, a lot of people just have sex and they don't even really like each other. It's almost,
Uh, it's a
and
purely physical level.
and the next, and sometimes people the next day, who was? Oh, geez, I didn't even get his name.
Uh, mm.
You sort of go like, I'd hate society to become like that, but Jude, I don't want to either become across an old fuddy duddy because I think and I was watching Jude. This is a total digression. I was watching a program. It was the other night in RT. It was called The Sinners, and it was a woman went on a journey about a priest in Navan, and about he was a rare mixture. He was actually very kind in some ways, but no women who had children, the fallen women, and how they were treated, and Jude, our attitude in the past towards sex was unbelievably bad. Anyway, it was about mother and baby homes again, but it was about more an individuals than sort of the societal thing. And
Mm.
I sat and watched. And I thought, Jesus, Jude, our attitude as in the Catholic Church in Ireland up until quite recently was horrendous,
But
absolutely horrendous.
but Pat, do you know, I agree with you completely, completely from beginning to end. That
Yeah,
that was the one sin when I was a young fella. That was one sin, was something to do with sex.
yeah,
But I would say now that apparently the one, what would you call it, the one virtue, or not even virtue, the thing that is denounced most
mm,
is the sexual sins of the clergy over the
yeah,
decades. And certainly, I gather there was these sins going on, and there was a lot of hypocrisy. But nobody in society, as far as I know, has come up and said there was other things the way the church acted
yeah,
that were appalling, or that man there, besides being a jerk like Conor McGregor, who was,
yeah,
for example, who is convicted of raping that woman.
yeah,
Um, that's the thing that draws attention. If Conor McGregor had swindled a bank that wouldn't get half the
Not
publicity.
at all. No.
So
Mm.
I think there's a sort of a sleazy, self-righteous. It's a bit like they used to have when they was it the Sun or the News of the World used to have a headline: "Disgusting events at Vicar's party,"
Party, yeah, yeah.
and then they go into detail about
Dude, I
exactly what
always
these
loved it.
events
It's a
were.
true story. A certain IRA man in Derry, his mother's going through his room one day, and she found condoms. And he was at university in Belfast when he come home, and what do you call it? And the minute they come in the door, she berated him. What are you doing with those condoms? He says, "Mum, I'm on the IRA." Oh, she says, "Thanks God, I thought you were having sex." He was using them for jelly night.
Uh, that's a good one, Pat. That's a good one. I don't know whether it's true or not, but it should be
Oh, it's
true.
true. By the way, I can even tell you the name of the guy, but not on air.
I wouldn't be surprised if I know who it is.
Uh,
Um, shall we go on a little bit and talk
by
about
the
these
way, Joe, do
tariffs?
you realize today is
Oh, this is
Trump's,
Monday.
this is Trump's D-Day for
Oh, it's
tariffs?
Friday. What?
Uh,
Trump's D-Day for tariffs, exactly.
yes.
10, and this is the problem now. Across the border, 10% for Bushmills, a tariff of 10%, a tariff of 15%
Percent for
on the other
Jameson.
side of the border for Jameson.
Uh,
And this is, as the Irish Times says, this is bewildering cross-border trade. It seems to be an example of one up for unionism. If I was a
yeah.
unionist, I'd be saying, hey, you see, it costs you if you're living in the South, but up here, we're getting away because we're part of Great Britain. Um, I think it's a cost to the consumer that kicks in after the cost to the exporter has been paid.
Hey,
You
Jude,
know,
can I read you this? I wrote it down because CNN have an economics guy on, and
yeah,
and this is what he said about the tariffs. He thinks they're bollocks. He says, "I stand by my comment that the trade deals being announced are largely garbage because they are so uncertain, with no mechanisms for enforcement or even any idea how to make them happen." In other words, Congress is supposed to spend years doing out deals, working out the detail, working on enforcement and all the rest. Trump's announcing deals. There's no backup or from the Congress. There's no legislation to put them in place. There's nobody knows how much you're going to be in agriculture products, how much you're going to be in drugs, etc., and so on. And as Trump wants, he wants something like 650 billion. The EU to buy it by the end of his term as president and all the rest. Dude, it's all about optics for him as president.
that's right. That's right. And we now have only a minute and a half left, Pat. And do you know, we haven't discussed the Padre Tobin
Yeah.
uh, video.
Right.
It's got, well, it's
You tell me
excited.
about it now.
It's,
Use the
in
minute
a
and a half.
minute, a bit tough. He's very much in favor. He says this idea of the border, he sees it as building blocks. And
Mhm.
he says what we should be doing is knocking away little blocks at a time. So there might be something could be made in common for some aspect of education. Could be
Yeah.
something could be made in common for some term in say industry. He said medicine, all sorts of things. And he says
Mhm.
if that's done, the wall of the border, so to speak, will be lowered. And then when
Mhm.
the time comes for the border poll, it won't be such a big if there was a successful border poll, it
So
won't
you
be
put
such a
that one up, Jude. That's one's already up.
it's up already.
And
There's
what's the
another one
next
coming
one?
up later this week, and it's going to feature the actor Dan Gordon.
Oh,
Dan
very
Gordon
good.
who
I'll
played
look forward
Cool
to it.
Hand, not it's got Cool Hand Luke, Red Hand Luke in Give
Uh,
My Head Peace.
uh,
Okay,
okay, Jude.
all right, Pat.
All the
Thanks.
best. All
Okay,
the
all the
best,
best.
Jude. Bye, Jude.